Stay cold 'cause we on payroll, stay patient. It's all dedicated to Versace. Hope I get picked by the Illuminati. I just woke up with a new hangover. Hope I get hit by a new Bugatti 'cause my pockets say don't rap no more. Heart saying play the track some more. I had Dior but can't afford that no more. It's hip hop, got it in the thrift shop like a more. Look at rhyme is money, I'm straight. The time is money, I'm late. Now I'm sitting on a.
Hey everybody, welcome B&B's Football Happy Hour. We are back, we are bearded, we are beautiful. As always, I am Bobby with my man Brian.
What's going on? Glad to be back for 13, 14 episodes now?
I think we're 14 now, my friend.
14, yeah. Good one tonight. Some good some teams that hit close to home tonight, so should be a good one.
Yeah, no kidding. I believe they played 2 Super Bowls together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So pumped about that. Little Eagles, little Patriots talk this evening. And we're also touching on something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is fantasy football. I live it. I breathe it. I can't wait to talk about our top 3 fantasy draft rules. So I know a lot of fantasy drafts are coming up here soon. I know I have a couple, at least 3 or 4 coming up, in the next couple of weeks. So we want to hit on these draft rules and some fantasy football stuff. We might do a little fantasy twist on our shows. I posted on the site that if you have any questions about fantasy, please private message Brian or myself, and we will do our best to answer all of them. I just posted today, and I know we already got at least 1 or 2 in, so we'll try to hit those at the end of the show.
Yeah,
pumped, man.
Yeah, we got
love
a good,
fantasy football.
Yeah, man. Like we talked about earlier this week, I think it's something. I mean, I think I've been playing. I don't know. I just remember my buddy Ben had like the fastest internet on the block, and I know he showed us he showed us one year, and we were like, "What the heck is this?" And it was on Yahoo, and it had to have been like 99 or 2000. I think that's probably when we all got into it. I think, yeah, it was probably like middle school at that point. And
yeah, man. 1997 for me, Yahoo Fantasy Baseball is the first thing I ever touched. The dial-up internet, the AOL, the AIM, Fire 5420 was doing research on some fantasy baseball stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been doing it a long time, been in the fantasy world forever.
Yeah, I actually have I got my fantasy team locked and loaded for the last 4 months. I guess they're going to get ready to go here soon. So.
Oh, yeah. We got the NFL and NFLPA. They've agreed no preseason games. They agreed on the COVID testing, which I think are probably the biggest 2 hurdles they need to get across. How are they going to do the testing, all that stuff? And they were able to get over those hurdles. So, hey, as of right now, we are on pace to start the season on time, and I am pumped.
Yeah. All right. You roll first this week. Give me your first.
All right. This is good because I'm calling you out on this one a little bit, man. My first rule is don't be a homer. If you are in a fantasy football league, you cannot be a homer. You got to stay away, if you can, from your own team. Now, I don't know, Brian. We never played fantasy football together, but I feel like you might fall victim to this rule. I know a lot of my friends do. They just can't help themselves. When I'm in a draft and I see a player out there that, that player probably shouldn't be drafted yet, but the guy getting ready to pick is a fan of that player's team, man, I know he's probably getting off the board. In my league of record, the league I care about the most, and I've been playing in for a long time, I know I'm probably not going to get any Ravens players on my team. There's 3 or 4 guys in there that love the Ravens. They live in Baltimore, and they go off the board way too early. Now, don't get me wrong. If I'm sitting on a couch and I'm watching my Eagles play, I'm just as passionate as the next idiot, yelling at the TV and doing all that stupid stuff. But fantasy isn't about your heart. It's about your head. So
yeah.
one thing that I try to do is I try to come up with my own rankings. And I do that every year. And when I'm finished, almost always try to lower Eagles players almost a full round down from where I originally ranked them to make sure I don't have any biases out there. And I eliminate that from my rankings. Now, does that mean I miss out on players on my favorite team? Yep, sure does. Do I care? Nope. I'm in this thing to win. I know some guys that won't draft players from teams that they hate. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I will take that guy that you didn't like, and I will beat you with him. And I'll be real pumped about it. So if you're playing fantasy for fun, then by all means, draft your favorite players and your favorite team. but please join my league first so I can take your money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not reaching for any Eagles, but if they're there, I'm taking them. I mean, I watch the games, so I mean, if I can get a Miles Sanders, I mean, I'm not going to reach for him, but if he's there, I'm taking him over whatever somebody else. I think so. I don't know. I mean, I watch the games, so I don't put those guys. I don't hold them any higher in the rankings than like if it's like a Cowboy or an Eagles. Like I don't really care if I'm playing for money. I mean, I don't really care what team you're on. If you're going to score points, you're going to score points. But if it's like I don't know, if it's like a rookie or somebody that's kind of uncertain and then a guy maybe on the Eagles that could get picked in my spot, I mean, I might pick the guy on the Eagles. I don't load up with them, but I mean, for the last few years, I at least have one of the guys on my team, whether it could be the kicker or, you know, it could be Elliott or, you know, if I could get Ertz or I didn't get Sanders last year, but I mean, if I could get him, I'm definitely taking him. But yeah, I don't reach for those guys, but I don't mind them though.
I know I was in a league one time with a guy who's a Giants fan, and I was like, "Hey man, like how high do you have Ezekiel Elliott ranked?" He goes, "I don't have him ranked. I'm not dropping him." Like, what do you mean? He's the best running backs in the NFL. He's like, "Oh no, he plays for the Cowboys. I hate the Cowboys. I don't want him on my team." Cha-ching. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to pick Dak Prescott, but I mean, I'll take Elliott or Cooper or CeeDee Lamb or Gallup. I mean, I'll take one of those guys.
Okay, so there are a few players you might not take.
A few players I might not take. I don't know. There's enough quarterbacks out there that, yeah, I don't think I want to risk my fantasy money on a Prescott or somebody like that. But I don't know. I'll take some Eagles. If you can get Deshaun late, I might grab him, stash him on the bench. You never know. Maybe play him in the wide receiver running back slot or something like that. A couple weeks, you never know. He could get hot. Somebody like that. But
I love having.
Yeah, I'm not reaching for Sanders or anybody or Wentz, anybody in like the first couple rounds. I mean, I'm leaving him.
I love having Eagles on my team. Like if it happens, but it rarely does. Like Miles Sanders, I mean, I'm not taking him. Some people are taking him in the first round, second round. If I'm late in the second round, I might take him, but he's going to be gone by then. And you know, I probably have him ranked, you know, somewhere where I could get him, but I'm just worried. Like I might have him ranked a little too high. Higher than he should be just because I love him so much.
Yeah. All right. So that leads me to my first rule is I stay pretty patient on quarterbacks. I know some guys, you know, quarterbacks do put up big numbers, you know, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, those guys are studs. I mean, they're fantasy studs. But like you said, I'm not going to pick Lamar or Mahomes probably in the first round. I mean, I'm probably going running back for sure. I mean, there's a lot less good running backs out there. You know, if you're in a 10-person league, I mean, you're going to get a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Last year in fantasy, there was over 23 quarterbacks that averaged 15 points a game. So, I mean, you're going to get production from your quarterbacks. I mean, it's a passing league. I've done a few mock drafts prior to this episode, and I mean, you can get guys like Russell Wilson and Breeze and, you know, Wentz and Brady and all them guys are going in like the 8th to 10th round. I mean, those guys are going late. I mean, people are picking Lamar and Patrick even in the second and third round than the ones that I've done. So, you know, I'm not reaching on a quarterback. They're always there. And even sometimes I don't know. I wait pretty late on QB, I think. I like to load up on running backs and receivers in my league. So quarterbacks are kind of plug and play on a matchup, I think, more than any other player. So I kind of waited out on QBs.
Now, if you look, you know, at the end of every season, if you look at who scored the most fantasy points, the top 20 is littered with quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the difference between, say, the 4th highest scoring quarterback and the 10th highest scoring quarterback, there's not a huge difference between those guys. So like you said, I agree 100%. I wait and wait and wait. I did a mock draft the other day. I got Aaron Rodgers in the 11th round. Now, Aaron Rodgers had a terrible year last year. And I know that because I had him on one of my teams, and it was awful. But if I get him in the 11th, I mean, come on. He's got something to prove this year. I'll do that all day, every day. So I absolutely concur, and I definitely wait and wait and wait on QBs. I usually wait forever on tight ends as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can find some talent. I think tight ends a little deeper than a lot of people, usually think. But this year, I think, it's kind of consensus. People think tight end's a little deeper position. But I wait on both of those because you can definitely find some gold later on in the draft. I mean, Matt Stafford's he's like the 14th or 15th quarterback off the board. And I mean, if you told me, looking back at this time next year, if Matt Stafford ended up being a top 6-7 quarterback, I'd believe it easy. So
yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Hey, like you said, I mean, Rodgers in the 11th round, he's going to be your starting quarterback. So you're loading your team up with receivers, running backs, everybody else. Like if you were to wait, I mean, what kind of running back are you going to get in the 11th round? I mean, you're not going to get nobody.
So people that like, especially beginners and stuff, or, Baltimore homer people. Well, if I get Lamar Jackson, if I take him in the first round, I'm really getting two players. I'm getting a starting running back and a starting quarterback. But that's not true, because if you look at just his running stats, they were similar to Tariq Cohen's last year. If you look at just his passing stats, I don't even think he was a top 10 quarterback. But you put those stats together, and it makes him incredible. So, yeah, he's an incredible quarterback, and he's one of the highest scoring players probably going to happen in the league this year, unless he drops off a lot, like my bold prediction was. Keep an eye on that. But he's not what a lot of people who aren't as educated in the fantasy world think that he is. He is not a number one running back and a number one quarterback. He's not, though. You put those two things together, and he's, a world beater at QB, but he's not that. He's not 2-7. You're not getting a 2-for-1 here. So you just got to break down the numbers and look at it objectively.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting a Lamar Jackson, that means your running backs probably are Tariq Cohen and Sony Michel or something like that. So, Lamar Jackson better be worth like 4 players if you pick him in the first round.
If you're playing in my league and you're listening, I encourage you, please draft a QB in the first 2 rounds. Please do it. I encourage that. That would be great. If you're not in one of my leagues, don't be dumb. Wait. There's a lot of talent late. You'll be fine.
Yep.
All right. My number 2 is know your league settings. And this is one that, and especially scoring, this is one that a lot of people tend to gloss over, especially new players. They just assume, like, I'm in one fantasy league, so I'll join another one. But those 2 leagues could be way different as far as scoring goes and how the league is run. One thing that's great about fantasy football is you can make it really anything that you want. So you can have a run-of-the-mill league that's, kind of goes along with the flow and like whatever, but, the most popular leagues are. Or you can have all kinds of weird, crazy settings. You can have, tight ends. If they point per reception, it could be 2 points per reception for tight ends and half a point for running back. I mean, it could be crazy. Mm-hmm. I can't even begin to list all of the stuff, so I'll just let that go. But take my word for it, especially if you're new to fantasy football, go over whatever league you're in. Make sure you go over those settings and make sure you know how the scoring works. Like I said, a perfect example of this is a PPR league versus a non-PPR league. PPR stands for point per reception. So if you have that, every time one of your players catches a pass, they get a point for that. If you're in a non-PPR league, then they don't get points per reception. So last year in a standard non-PPR league, Christian McCaffrey scored 355 points. In a PPR league, he jumps up to 471. That's a 116-point difference, which is enormous. It's like 7 points a game over a 17-week season. 16 games, but yeah. So now, granted, I mean, he gets a point per. So he had 116 catches. He gets 116 extra points in those PPR leagues, which jumps him up to the top of the charts for the highest scoring player in the league. Obviously, C-Mac is one of the best players in the league. So let's take him out of the equation. Let's look at someone else who's a contributor, but he's not going to get drafted in the first couple rounds. Last year, James White was being drafted in the 7th round of most fantasy drafts, right around the 30th running back off the board. By the end of the season, in a non-PPR league, that's right about where he was. He ranked as the 29th highest scoring running back. But in PPR leagues, he was the 18th highest scoring back. So if you're in a PPR league and you're talking about a guy like James White who does that. In a PPR league, he's an every week starter for you. He could be your second running back that you're playing that week. Whereas in a non-PPR league, I mean, maybe he's your flex position starter if you don't have a better option. Tariq Cohen, he's another guy that a lot of his scoring comes from catching passes. Again, he had a down year last year, but he's not going to get a whole lot of points running the ball, but he's going to catch those passes, and that's where he's going to make you your money. He's going to get you your points. So please make sure you pay attention to stuff like that. Know your league settings, especially if it's PPR or non-PPR, because that can completely flip players around and make someone like James White, who in a non-PPR, he's not that valuable. But in a PPR, I mean, you're talking an every week starter for yourself. So make sure you pay attention to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially if you're playing with your buddies, you're playing for a little money. I mean, you got to know what's going on. So like you said, those draft boards change from PPR to standard. So yeah, you got to know what's going on.
QBs too, most leagues I think are 4 points for a passing touchdown. Well, if you have another league that's 6 points for a passing touchdown, you might have a rushing quarterback like Lamar Jackson, and then you might have like back in the day, like a Peyton Manning. He's not going to get you any rushing yards, but he's going to throw more touchdown passes than most. So even though you have a running quarterback who gets yards, rushing the ball and rushing touchdowns, Peyton might still be able to score more because he's going to get, far more passing touchdowns than that other guy.
Yeah.
So lots of stuff to pay. Make sure you know those scoring systems.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess that kind of ties into my second point here is I don't hold a lot of stock into this, but I mean, I think, like you said, knowing your settings, I think you can't ignore when you're drafting drafting so many guys on the same bye week. I don't let that dictate my draft strategy, but I definitely take mental notes on bye weeks because I think, you could come out of a draft and love your team. And then you're looking at it and when you're done and you got 4 guys on bye week 8, and then you're kind of screwed because somebody's got to go. I mean, you're going to have to drop a few guys. I don't know. There's just a lot of maneuvering around. I like kind of mixing up the bye weeks. I don't know, especially when I'm drafting my bench guys. I don't like, I kind of just have to spread out the bye weeks a little bit, I think. You don't want to go 4 or 5 guys on the same bye week because it's all right to have – you're always going to have that 1 week, where you have 2 or 3 guys out. But you just don't want to turn that one bad week into a bad month if you have, 4 guys on a bye week and then you have to drop some players and pick some other guys up and then your lineups just kind of might be, I don't know, kind of going downhill. It kind of screws you a little bit there. So I definitely take that into consideration, not with my top, 5 or 6 picks, but when I'm picking backups and different guys like that, I definitely match up the bye weeks to make sure and kind of just, with that little amount of time that I have, I use it to that's one of the things I look at. So I don't ignore the bye week because it could get you.
So if you listen to fantasy experts, quote unquote, and listen to them, they're, in my opinion, it seems like they're split about 50-50 as far as who cares about it, who doesn't. And you and me are also split 50-50. I do not look at bye weeks. Whenever I'm drafting a team, I want to create the best team that I can. So if I have a couple players that I'm, in my queue, I'm ready to draft, and the highest ranked player I have, if he's sharing a bye week of 2 or 3 other players on my team, well, that week is probably going to suck for me. But I know over the whole course of the season, that player's going to score more than anybody else in my queue. So I'm going to go ahead and draft him. And I have enough faith in I've been playing fantasy since 1997. I have enough faith in my drafting and my ability to manage a waiver wire that I think I'm going to be okay because I'm going to be able to maneuver myself in order to pick up somebody from the waiver wire and plug him in that's going to do well. And for me, I'm planning ahead too. So if I know in my head I got, 4 guys with a week 9 bye, I know when week 3 rolls around, week 4 rolls around, I can start thinking that, like, okay, well, I got, this player, might not be playing up to, what I thought he was going to do. So I'm able to drop him early and pick up somebody else late. And by the time, week 9 I talked about, by the time we get to week 9, your team might look completely different. You may do 2 or 3 trades by then. You might do 5 or 6 waiver wire pickups, and your team looks completely different. So you might not even have that problem by the time week 9 rolls around. Yeah. So that's something that me personally, I don't look at. I don't really worry about. The one thing I will think about sometimes is if pairing quarterbacks and wide receivers, and because obviously they're going to have the same vibe, they're on the same team. So I might think, if I'm looking at Josh Allen and Matt Stafford sitting there side by side, and I already have Stephon Diggs on my team, I'm not sure if I want to really pair Josh Allen and Matt Stafford together, or I'm sorry, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs together. Now, if I got Matt Stafford on the team or I'm sorry, Kenny Golladay, and I'm looking at Stafford and Josh Allen, well, Stafford's, he's a better throwing the ball, passing quarterback than Josh Allen. Josh Allen gets a lot of his points from running the ball, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns. Stafford's getting all his throwing. So I might be more prone to pair Stafford and Golladay together rather than Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. So that's something I'll look at. But as far as bye weeks go, unless it's the exact same, unless they're playing on the same team, I don't worry about it, man. I just let it fly.
All right.
So my last one is to be flexible during your draft. Too many people, they get in their heads like they got to do this, they got to do that. I need to get a running back in the round 1, or like I need 3 wide receivers and 3 running backs in the first 6 rounds. And they have this set plan, this set scheme in their head, and don't do that. Trust me, you need to build the best team that you can. If it's the first round and it's your turn to pick, and you're staring at a wideout who you have this as the 6th overall ranked player in your rankings that you do, and there's a running back who might be the 11th ranked player you have overall, don't reach for that running back. Take that receiver. In your mind, that receiver is a better player, so take him. You'll be okay. Don't reach for players if you don't have to. One team that has come up over the last 5 years, or I'm sorry, one term that's come up over the last 5 years is 0 running back strategy. Maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago is the first time I heard it. So basically what 0 running back strategy is, for almost the entire history of fantasy football, people have tried to load up on running backs early in drafts. Running backs tend to score a lot of points. Back in the day, several years ago, there were a lot more bell cow backs playing all 3 downs, getting a ton of carries, ton of yards, ton of touchdowns. So people would try to grab them early. However, last few years in the NFL, it's gotten really pass happy. So people started saying, you know what, screw it. I'll draft wide receivers early since they're getting so many more looks and so many more catches, and then I'll try to get running backs later on the draft. Well, the year was 2013, well before anyone had ever even heard of 0 running back strategy. And there's a guy in my league, we'll call him Dan, mostly because his name is Dan. And he was up to pick in round 1, and he takes Calvin Johnson. That makes sense. Even back in the day, Calvin Johnson, number 1 receiver, he's a beast. Round 2 rolls around. Obviously, he needs a running back because everybody else is taking running backs. And he takes A.J. Green, back when A.J. Green was in his prime. And I remember the whole room started laughing, mocking him, and rightfully so. The guy, obviously, he had too many dad sodas or something was going on. He was losing his mind. Finally, round 3, he takes a running back, Frank Gore. 4th round rolls around, he takes a quarterback. So 4 rounds have gone by, and he only has 1 running back on his team. Well, I'm sitting there counting up the cash that he has just donated to the league. But now I'm not calling Dan a trendsetter, but he went 0 running back strategy before that was even a thing, and he ended up finishing in the top 3 that year. He stuck to his draft board. He was flexible. Now, he wanted running backs early, but when he was picking, they weren't there. So he didn't stand pat on what he planned to do. He adapted on the fly, and it paid off from a man. So take that as a lesson. Don't let your draft strategy be set in stone. Be willing to modify, adapt, especially on the fly, because those draft picks, man, they go quick.
Yeah, and like you said, there's always somebody out there that doesn't pick a guy that you think they'll pick, or they reach for somebody. So your draft board will always change. So you're always going to end up, I think, with guys you never thought you could get, really, to be honest. I mean, I always feel like there's certain guys that I target that, I look at, maybe my next – you can always look down and see, like, who's going to be there during your next pick. And, I feel like I always ended up with a better team that way because there's always guys reaching. So, yeah, I mean, I'm always pretty flexible. I don't really have too much of a strategy. I mean, I follow a few things that I pay attention to, and there are some guys I like, going into the year, maybe some sleeper guys that I try to pick later on, and maybe there's some guys that I don't want to pick. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty flexible in fantasy. I'm out there to pick the best guy available. So
I mean, there are definitely guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are definitely guys that I don't really want. However, let's just say, for example, like I talked about Aaron Rodgers earlier, he burned me last year. So, and they didn't do anything to help him out in the receiving core, which we talked about, ad nauseum. But so let's say I'm sitting there in round 8, and Aaron Rodgers is there. I don't want him. Round 9, I don't want him. 10, I don't want him. Well, I told you, I'm sitting there around 11 in a mock draft. I mean, if he's sitting there staring at me around 11, I mean, that's a 3-4 round like gift, depending on what league you're in, depending on how, people value the quarterbacks in your league and value Aaron Rodgers. If he's there in the 11th round, I mean, how do you not take him? Even if he's not one of your guys, the value is too good, and he's going to outperform everyone else behind him. So even if you're not high on him, he's definitely going to be better than whoever's left. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it all depends on who you're playing with. Like you said, I mean, people have nobody tells you their strategy, so you have to go in there, and I think one of the best strategies might be just, like you said, to be flexible and pick the best team available. Don't go in there thinking you have to pick a running back in the first round or a receiver in the first round or a quarterback in the top 5 rounds or something like that. Just kind of wait it out, and like you said, you don't have a whole lot of time to pick. I mean, I think the most time that I have in the ones I do might be like 45 seconds. So, I mean, they go quick.
Ooh, that is quick, man. My leagues, if we usually do live drafts, like in person. So there's a little flexibility. It's usually 90 seconds to 2 minutes for us.
Yeah. I mean, I might do one that's a minute, maybe, if I do just like a random one on Yahoo. But yeah, all the ones that I got with my friends are like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. So,
man, that is quick.
Yeah. You got to know your stuff. So my last one is, my last 2 picks are always a defense and a kicker because I interchange them anyway pretty much throughout the year. I drop kickers a lot, pick them up based off of matchups. But like you said, there's always guys that reach, and I know some guys like are always trying to pick the number 1 defense in like the 8th round or something like that, or they'll pick a kicker just to fill out their roster because they'll see the roster. And, they'll have everybody filled except kicker, defense. And then, all of a sudden, come the 8th or 9th round, they want to fill those spots. And then, they're taking whatever Yahoo or whatever ESPN has as the top ranked defense, which is hard to tell because, I mean, defense and fantasy, I mean, obviously, but the better teams score points. But, I mean, to me, it's based off of, you get more points for touchdowns. So if like one team had like 3 pick sixes one year, the year before, I mean, they're probably going to be ranked higher than they probably should. I know last year I looked it up and the Bears were the number 1 ranked defense last year going into fantasy. And they finished as the 16th best overall defense last year. So, that doesn't really hold any weight. The 49ers ended up being the 3rd overall fantasy defense, and they were only drafted in 3% of the leagues going into fantasy. So I don't hold too much weight into, I mean, now look, I'm not taking like Lions defense or somebody like that, but I'm definitely not, I'm waiting. And, like you said, in a 10-team league, you should be able to get a decent defense. And I drop kickers in defense, maybe not every week, but, kickers have a shorter leash. If one week my kicker gets me 2 or 3 points, I'm dropping them and picking up somebody else that has a good matchup, that had a good week the week before, and I'm interchanging those guys pretty often in my fantasy, probably more than any other roster spot there. But Yeah, I don't hold much weight in the defense or kicker because in a 10-team league, I mean, you're going to get a top 10 kicker in the league. You know, from the number 1 guy to the 10 guy isn't going to be that many points. So you're going to end up, I mean, your kickers are going to get you points throughout the year. And defenses get kind of hot. So, you know, you can always find those teams that are playing, you know, if you have 1 week, a team that you know is just going to dominate, like the Bengals or something like that, like, you know, I'll pick them up or something like that. So I don't hold much weight into kickers and defense. I wait and pick them usually with my last 2 picks.
All right. I got a few things here. The first one is that I do not play in 10-team leagues. All the teams are stacked. The more teams you have, the more you're rewarded for the homework that you put in. And there is less luck involved because when you're a 10-team league, everybody's team is stacked. And there's always people out there on the waiver wire to get. You go to 12-team, now you might think, well, that's only 2 teams, but that's as far as your whole rosters go. You know, there's 15, 16 guys on a team. You know, you add 2, we're talking 32 more people are not on the waiver wire, or like in a 12-team league compared to a 10-team league. 12-team league, you have 32 less players to choose from on the waiver wire. I mean, that's a lot of talent there in as far as waiver wire goes. So I never play in 10-team leagues. I'm only 12 or higher. That's one thing I do. And because I'm doing research, I don't want some guy to get lucky and pick up, you know, somebody off the waiver wire that shouldn't even be there and end up winning. But another thing with the defenses, I could not agree more. If you look, you threw out 2 examples, but you could look at every single year, and it happens over and over and over. The Jaguars defense a couple years ago, I'm sure was the number 1 defense. Without even looking, I'm sure they were the number 1 fantasy defense or close to it. And then the next year, we fall off the map. Fantasy defenses are so hard to year in and year out. It's different. There's so much turnover, and this team's good and this team's not. Then, well, this team came. One year, I rode the Lions defense to a title. They decided like 3 weeks during the year they're going to blow up and score like 25 plus points 3 separate weeks, you know, and it's like, thank you, I'll take that. So defense is absolutely, definitely one of your last 2 picks. I could not agree more with that. And which leads me to my third point. I personally think kickers and defenses should be out of fantasy football. There's too much chance involved. The research you put in doesn't pay off all the time. It's way too erratic, the scoring. And so I'm out on those. The kicker, for the most part, I agree with you. But there are a few guys that I think, you know, if you want to go into the 12th round, 13th round, Justin Tucker, I mean, he's probably the greatest kicker of all time. Harrison Butker, kicker for the Chiefs. Obviously, Tucker's for the Ravens. Will Lutz for the Saints. Like, there are a couple guys right at the top that always kind of seem to remain at the top that you know are going to have a good season. And obviously, everyone has down games. But it's tricky because kickers are volatile like defenses are. Those 3 guys, I might move a little higher. And if you look at, by the end of the year, if you look at scoring, a lot of kickers are scoring above big name players. I think last year, Justin Tucker, I think he scored more points than Adam Thielen and Alvin Kamara, you know, right around there. Now, granted, those guys were hurt and missed a couple games, but Alvin Kamara was like the 4th overall pick in a lot of drafts, you know, and your kickers scoring as many points as them. So there's an argument to be made that you should pay attention to the kickers a little more and draft them a little earlier. However, I only think that applies to like maybe the first 3 kickers, and we're definitely talking double-digit rounds. We're talking 12th and later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know, and that allows you to jump on them a little earlier. Personally, it's tough. If I'm sitting there in the 13th round and I'm staring at Justin Tucker or Harrison Butker, I might hop on them then, but it depends on who else is out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it depends on who's there. I mean, at that point, you could have – you never know. At that point, you might have a rookie or a guy that you think might be a sleeper pick, you know, one of those guys that you might want to pick.
Right. You're basically making the decision between definite kicker points and then you're gambling you're gambling on a high upside sleeper that you think is going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your choice. You play it safe or go for the home run.
Yeah, and usually there's 2 or 3 people in the league that pick those guys, like, in the 9th or 10th round. So I just wait because there's always somebody. Once one guy picks a kicker, then it's bound to happen the next couple picks. Somebody, 1 or 2 other guys are going to pick a kicker too. So it's like, it's just like a snowball.
If my first couple kickers are off the board, then I'm out.
Yeah, just wait it out.
I'm done. Last 2 picks.
All right, man. I guess that's our 3 fantasy rules for everybody out there.
I tell you what, it helped me scratch the fantasy itch a little bit, but it's not even close to being taken care of, man.
Not yet. Yeah. Well, we're getting there soon. I think now we're going to roll into our first preview this week. We're going to roll with our Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Piccone. All right, we got Nick Piccone. He is our Eagles insider here. Nick's a guy I went to high school with back quite so many years ago. We've always stayed friends on Facebook. I know he does a lot of stuff for some different media outlets, so I'll let him talk. So let's tell everybody who you are, what you've been up to, and I guess why you're an Eagles fan.
You don't got to be modest, Brian. He took the third baseman position from me my junior year. That was pretty bad. I was pretty bad. So you can.
To be honest, I forgot about all that. To be honest.
No, you didn't. No,
I will say it was a fun time, even though I was sitting on the bench cheering everyone else on.
Yeah, we were pretty bad. We were pretty bad. So
1 year out of 4 is not bad. One in the conference, but I how many years later, we're working in media now. I run PhilaInfluencer.com with Sean Brace, former host of 97.5 The Fanatic, and now the program director of The Gambler, Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler here in Philly. So it's been a lot of fun. I've kind of been working with him for about 5 years now. The Gambler launched last August, and PhilaInfluencer.com still going strong after 5 years. And so I also host a wrestling podcast with Vaughn Johnson, who now works for the Eagles digital platforms producer. So he used to work for the Enquirer. So definitely got some good contacts in the media industry going on. And, it's crazy. It's been a crazy few years, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. That's good stuff. I'm going to jump right into it. So I guess it was maybe a week and a half ago. The Eagles signed back Jason Peters, which I kind of always thought would happen. But this time he's not going to play tackle. He's going to play right guard for Brandon Brooks, who's hurt again for like the 3rd year in a row. So what are your thoughts on JP coming back and switching positions? And, do you think he's going to be a pretty good fill-in for Brooks or what?
So my first instinct was that they weren't going to bring him back when they went into the offseason, thinking that if they did, it would be closer to training camp. And if there were any injuries, and lo and behold, Brooks got hurt, I kind of figured Peters would come back just in case they moved Dillard around. I didn't know they would move JP around, but it makes sense. Hall of Famer. He's better on your team than you would be without him. I think even as like a mentor, coaching mind that he has to help others, if he's up for that. He still thinks he can play at a high level. Let's just hope that he can stay on the field, because I think the main thing with him is staying on the field, because when he's on the field, he's been pretty great. False starts aside, he gets hurt a lot nowadays with his age getting up there, which I understand. But overall, I like the move. I think they needed it just in terms of leadership. Even if Brooks was healthy, I think that they should have brought him back just even to back up Dillard, if he would be up for that. Because I'm still, wondering about Dillard, how he's going to do. But, with moving JP to right guard, you kind of think that at least they have some confidence behind Dillard, you would hope, and maybe playing at the same time on the line with JP will help him.
Yeah.
Now, do you think he's going to play right guard, or do you think they'll keep on the left side, play left guard right next to Dillard?
I think when you have Brandon Brooks going down with an injury, Pro Bowler, you kind of have to put someone there that you would think would do just as good a job as he would. And if they don't feel like any other lineman can do that, I feel like it was like a month. It's been about a month since Brooks got hurt, a little over a month. So and what was it? Like you said, last week, they brought him back officially, but there was always rumors that he was going to come back anyway. But I think that kind of sped up the process. It's like, all right, let's get this thing going. Let's get the workouts in and all that. And I think with Brooks out, they thought JP was the only lineman they had that could probably fill his shoes. And it's going to be tough. It's really going to be tough. It's not a whole new position, because I think he played some before in college, or maybe even before that. And I know the technique is different, but at least, that body is there. Jason Peters is there. If he's a quick learner for that right guard position now in 2020, that's even better. So I just think like having a Hall of Famer there is better than probably anything else they had.
Yeah, I like the move.
Yep.
I love the move. I think, who was it? Trey Thomas. I think I read an article. He said having Jason Peters playing right guard is like telling Bryce Harper to go bat right-handed, which I didn't really agree with. Because I think that's a pretty, I don't know. I think that's a little much. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Jason Peters. I mean, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and
it's definitely different. Like even playing defensive back, like if you're a corner and you line up on the right side, it's your footwork and everything is different on the left side. So it will be different, but which is why I asked if they thought, you might keep Peters on the left side. But Peters, like you said, he's probably got a Hall of Fame career. So, he's going to be okay over there.
And I'm not completely sold that the Eagles don't take into account public opinion. If Peters came back and they kept him ahead of Dillard, that they were going to face a lot of scrutiny because of that. Dillard, number one pick, and he's still not able to start. Like, what's up with that? And I think part of their decision, maybe not 100%, maybe not even 80% of their decision could have been based on that. They were just like, you know what, let's just get him back in here, especially when Brooks went down. And maybe they were kind of on not completely sold bringing him back was a good idea for Dillard's psyche. But now with Brooks out, they can kind of tell you, okay, he's moving to right guard, and maybe behind the scenes he's working with Dillard at the same time, which I think is a smart move.
Yeah. All right, Nick, we're going to hop sides of the ball here. Last year as a whole, the Eagles defense was kind of just blah. They're third in rushing yards given up, which is great, but they were 19th in passing yards, 15th in points given up. I'm a firm believer that the key to building a team, you start with the big boys on the inside, you work your way out. I always feel that Philly never really stuffs the stat sheets when it comes to sacks. And I did a little research, and I was kind of proven to be right. Working backwards, starting with this season and ending all the way back in 2012, the Eagles finished 13th, 10th, 16th, 17th, 19th, 3rd in 2014, and then 20th and 26th in sacks for the league. And that's just not going to cut it. They haven't even really tried to address the pass rush in the draft either. Brandon Graham was drafted in the first round in 2010. Fletcher Cox and Vinnie Curry were both drafted in 2012, and then Derek Barnett in 2017. But none of those guys have big sack productions. And Cox, he's one of the best defensive linemen in the league, but he's more of a disruptor than really like a sack artist. So, and sometimes sack numbers, they can be skewed a little bit. For instance, Philly was 13th in sacks last year, but they were 4th in QB knockdowns. So they're getting there, but they're not making it count. So what needs to happen in order for the Eagles to break in the top 10 at least in sacks again and start dominating other QBs?
It's almost like a double-edged sword when it comes to defense. If your secondary is not very good and your pass rush is good, your pass rush doesn't mean much. If your pass rush is not very good, but your secondary is great, guys are going to find their way open because there's no pass rush. So that's kind of when you labeled or throughout the stats, like I just remember watching these games and I'm like, why is the quarterback getting so much time? And there's a lot of missed tackles too in that. So I'm more apt to, I'm not ready to blame Jim Schwartz's scheme altogether because you went back to all the way to 2012 and Jim Schwartz wasn't here at that point. So I think it's almost like an organizational philosophy that they go for the playmaker when it's available in like free agency, and then they hope they hit in the draft. And that's kind of when you're drafting Derek Barnett high, Brandon Graham high, and it took Graham a long time to kind of, what was it, that 2017 season where the defense was on a roll almost every single game. So we're like, okay, that's the Brandon Graham that we were expecting, but it's because everything else was clicking. And you have Patrick Robinson here, and then when he left, it's like the secondary got so much worse. It's like, really, can one player really affect that scheme so much? So I'm hoping that, like, they're smart guys, smart coaches, a smart front office, because they wouldn't be where they are. They wouldn't have a Super Bowl title. They wouldn't have made the playoffs the last 2 years with kind of like not a great roster. Everyone says like a practice squad or whatever, but the injuries have killed them, and they've still found ways to get in the playoffs. And I think there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, you don't want to find yourself in that position every single year. So when are they going to put some of that effort into like the draft and drafting these defensive guys, defensive line, and not rely on free agency? Malik Jackson was a big pickup 2 years or last year, and he got hurt, week one. And we really didn't get to see him and Fletcher Cox together. And then you kind of got to rely on that rotation that Jim Schwartz uses, and got to make sure everyone's like fresh. And, but when your secondary is not that great, and it's taken a long time for that secondary to come around. It did it last season. I think when they lost to the Saints 2 seasons ago, that it was absolutely dreadful. And then they got better week after week. Last season seemed to be around the same thing. It was like they got better towards the end of the season and the playoffs, and they just can't wait that long. I don't know what makes Jim Schwartz and even Doug Peterson just wait until really their backs are against the wall. They're facing elimination, and they wait to finally make like the right moves. Maybe it's because they don't think they have the guys on the roster, and that's that's on Howie. You have to go through free agency. You have to go through the draft and really pinpoint your deficiencies and try to get better. And I'm with you. I don't think they've done a good enough job. And the fact is they think they have, and they're like really high. And, they drafted for need this year, it seemed, when they went regular. So I think it's like maybe you take the best available player at some point and hope that's a defensive player. With their philosophy, it's really hard to pinpoint why they feel a certain way about defensive players, drafting them in certain spots and waiting, or, talk about draft stock and all that stuff. If Jim Schwartz can't get the most out of them early, you might find yourself out of the playoffs, and then it really doesn't matter until the next year. So I just think they kind of waste time with that. And it's been year after year after year. And Fletcher Cox, everyone loves him, but you're right. Like, he kind of is just a disruptor. You don't see him. He's not, like a Reggie White. He's not that type of player, but he can be so much more than he is. And even if he gets double teamed, it should open up everything else. And you just see quarterbacks should stand there, look for the open guy in the secondary. Isn't there, so they get a first down on like a 3rd and 40. It's frustrating.
One stat, when I was looking at the Eagles defense, I did find the craziest stat that I never thought was true. They said the Eagles led in 3-and-out percentage. They were the number one team last year in the league at 27.5% of the time they forced the 3-and-out, which I never thought. Watching every game, I never thought that was possible. I didn't know. I don't know who's doing that math, but that might be.
Must have been all the NFC East games.
Yeah.
Man,
I read that and I was like,
too,
this can't be wrong.
No, I feel like I'll watch all those games, and I'm like, you can never get off the field, but
yeah, there's no
apparently
way
they can.
All right, man. So a guy I'm super high on this year is Miles Sanders. I think he's going to be a stud this year, but when you take a look at those options behind him, I mean, I'm not real big on Boston Scott. I mean, he came in last year and he did like win that Giants game for us, and he put up some decent games there towards the end of the year, but I mean, looking at behind Sanders, there's not much. I mean, it's Boston Scott, and they brought back Corey Clement, who's been hurt for a few years. I mean, he had a good year during that Super Bowl run. He had a good game in the Super Bowl, but he hasn't really been on the field since then. What do you think about running back depth? And do you think they might need to bring in a veteran guy, maybe, if there's anybody out there? Or I'd love to bring in a veteran, kind of like the year that we won the Super Bowl when they had LeGarrette Blount. I mean, a guy like that, a bigger guy, because, I mean, Sanders and Scott are pretty small.
Freeman.
Yeah. Freeman, yeah. Just a veteran. I don't know. Just somebody different. I mean, I think Sanders is going to have a huge year, but I don't know. He can't play every single play. So, I'm not really sold on Boston Scott. So just give me your thoughts on him, and what do you think about running back this year?
Yeah. I think Sanders is kind of lucky he's early in his career. So if he were to give in the workload, he'd be able to handle it right now. But I do think that's not indicative of success for the Eagles this season. I agree. I was very angry when Jordan Howard signed with Miami. I was hoping they would bring him back. I was a big fan of him in Chicago. And when they traded for him, I was like, yes, I anticipated he would have a LeGarrette Blount-like year this past season when Blount was here in 2017. It wasn't exactly like that. He got hurt a little bit. But he was still kind of he had a good yards per carry. I don't have it in front of me, but I just remember his YPC being more I don't know, just the eye test. I'm looking at the eye test, and I'm like, they were better with Jordan Howard healthy and carrying the load, and then giving Sanders, some of the smaller carries and whatnot. Sanders did great with them. So, like you, Brian, I'm very confident in Sanders this season. I think he's going to be probably up there with one of the top offensive players of the season. I think he's going to really help Carson Wentz, and I think that's crucial. And that's why I'm kind of annoyed that Howie didn't re-sign Jordan Howard, because, I mean, was he going to get the same amount of money in Philly that he did in Miami? Probably not. So I don't blame Jordan Howard, but that was my guy. I got super attached to him, and I was like, I want him and Sanders back. And then when he went to Miami, I'm like, man, I'm kind of glad they brought back Scott and Clement. So at least you have those two that are familiar with the offense. And I like Freeman. Freeman's the guy now. I think that they should go after and hopefully get their, number 2 or number 3 back. He's not a number 1, but he could still provide a lot of guidance to having that veteran, and that, Corey Clement's not a veteran. Boston Scott's not a veteran. So if you have at least one veteran in that group and you keep all 4 of them, I think it bodes well for Carson Wentz. And I think I'm thinking more along those lines. What helps Wentz the most? And Sanders is the number 1 with Freeman behind him, I think, is the best option they have right now. I just wish it was Howard. I'm still attached to him, and I still get mad that he's in Miami. Miami's probably going to watch them win the AFC East or something. They stocked up this offseason. But, Howard was my guy, and I'm still kind of steamed about that.
So Brian says 1,850 total yards rushing receiving for Miles Sanders. What do you think?
At 11.
I'll take the under just because I don't know. I don't trust. I mean, I should trust Doug Peterson, right? He won a Super Bowl here, but if he does those screen passes like Andy Reid did, I think there's a good chance of that. But I just have a feeling it'll maybe closer around 1,500.
All right. So everyone and anyone who watched the NFL last year knows that the Eagles receiving core was a joke. Arguably the best wide receiver on the team by the end of the year, and it might not even be arguably, came from the practice squad after injuries ravaged Philly's receiving core. But this has been an issue for half a decade. The last time the Eagles had a 1,000-yard receiver was all the way back in 2014 when Jeremy Maclin went for 1,300 yards and 10 TDs. A fun little fact on that is there have been 116 1,000-yard receiving seasons since the Eagles last did it. The Eagles have done great drafting tight ends to help the passing game. They took, Zach Ertz. They got Dallas Goedert. But receivers have been another story. First rounder Nelson Aguilar and second rounder J.J. Arcega-Whiteside have not been the answer. So is Jalen Reagor the guy? Will he be the one to break the 1,000-yard mark? And if so, when? I don't think he's the guy this year. I mean, maybe he'll be a go-to guy. I don't know. Or are we playing the waiting game?
I think in terms of what we've seen the last few years and injury-wise, you can't rely on Alshon. You can't rely on Deshaun. So Reagor might have to be the guy, whether the Eagles want him to be this year or not. I think he's got to be that Greg Ward of last year all season. The speed helps. I think Wentz can definitely use the speed. We saw it in week 1 against Washington. He found Deshaun for 2 touchdowns, and it's like, man, where was this? Like, maybe that's all Carson needs. Maybe that's, and then he got hurt, the next week.
It only lasted 1 week.
That was they didn't have any speed after that. And, really, I think you can be such a great quarterback, and I do think Carson Wentz is a great quarterback, but you can't do everything, and you need like a running game. You need a speedy wide receiver to make things easier for you. Not everyone gets that. But I think we saw Wentz just was kind of lost. He's like, what do I do if I don't have my speed wide receiver? What do I do if I don't have a running game? And he's just holding on to the ball forever, trying to make something happen, increasing the probability he gets hurt. And then we saw in the playoff game, unfortunately, what happened. I don't hold that against him. He's just trying to get a first down. But it's one of those things where I think when I was kind of not in, I don't want to say like over the top happy with the Jalen Reagor pick, but if they feel like he fits into the offense and they like what he brings, and you can't rely on Deshaun Jackson to stay healthy. I like the fact that they brought him back last year, but I knew he would have injury issues, and I didn't think it would be week 2. I was hoping he'd at least play a little more than that, but that's my number one fear of these guys. What if Reagor gets hurt, and then what? And got to rely on Marquise Goodwin, I guess, and he's probably their number 4, number 5 wide receiver at this point. There's no official depth chart, but I know there's one on like one of the websites I saw earlier today, RotoWire or something like that. I texted my friend who works for the Eagles, and he says there's no official depth chart yet, and I was like, of course. But I think Reagor is probably going to be up there. I can't trust Alshon or Deshaun, so Reagor's got to be the guy, whether there's a bunch of pressure on him or not. I think Wentz will help that, and I think Miles Sanders behind him will also help that, because he's not like Jordan Howard, and he's not like LeGarrette Blount, and he can swing out. He reminds me of Westbrook, and I'm not saying he's as good as Brian Westbrook, and I'm not going there, but if they could utilize him, swing him out, put him at wide receiver here and there, I think that gives the whole offense more to work with, and that just helps Reagor in the long run.
There you go. Hence my 750 receiving yards for Sanders. That's it right there. Case in point. Thanks for sealing that deal for me.
He might hit 1,000 then.
Yeah, maybe. You never know. They signed Freeman, maybe. I don't know. If they sign Freeman, my total goes down a little bit. It might go down to like 1,600 if they sign Freeman. But all right, man, I guess that wraps up our few Eagles questions here. So we like to give our guest kind of a little bit of a change of pace question here. So you said before you have a wrestling podcast. So why don't you go ahead and plug that real quick? We'll post it on our Facebook page, and then give us your top 3, your favorite all-time wrestling personalities.
All right. Yeah, my podcast is called The Straight Shooters. Came up with that in 2015. Me and Vaughn were just sitting there, and he's like, why don't we start a podcast? And I'm like, all right. I had just started writing for Philly Voice. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. Jimmy Kempski covers the Eagles for phillyvoice.com. So I started covering wrestling for them in 2015. And a few months later, Vaughn was with Philly.com at the time, and he was covering wrestling as well. So we just started a podcast, and been going 5 years ever since. We're everywhere. You can listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. We're called The Straight Shooters. We just kind of give you the good and the bad about pro wrestling globally in America, WWE, AEW, all those companies. We talk about the ins and outs of wrestling. There was a speaking out movement on Twitter not too long ago with some women wrestlers that were sexually assaulted, and they were speaking out on Twitter and telling their stories and everything. And we talked about that and how the culture around wrestling has to change. It's just a microcosm of society, and wrestling is no different than any other type of niche in the society. So we got to do better, and we talked about it and we put it out there. And so we talk about everything on there, whether it's inside the ring or outside the ring. And I will say, when I started the podcast, I mentioned that I really never had any favorite wrestlers, but doing the podcast for 5 years and talking about it every single week, I think we're up to 243 total episodes. So 244 is coming this week. And just based off all those episodes, I was like, you know what? I do have favorite wrestlers, and the Macho Man Randy Savage is my favorite of all time. The WWE Network helped when they launched it in 2014. How I could watch all the old shows. I had them on tape anyway because I grew up a wrestling fan. When I was 5 years old, I was taping everything. So I have a whole collection in storage. So the Macho Man Randy Savage is my number one guy. Bret the Hitman Hart, my number two. And really, I don't have a number three. I'd say The Undertaker, I guess, just because of the character. But like the characters and all that are larger than life. I got sucked into it when I was younger. My babysitter put it on TV one day, and I was like hooked instantly. And like Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, that was my thing back then. So I just got hooked, and I've been hooked ever since.
All right, dude, I got a quick wrestling thing. When I was younger, back in the day, like the early, mid-'90s, I was a huge Hacksaw Jim Duggan fan. And my dad took me to a wrestling match, and Hacksaw came out, and he did his, he had his 2x4s and hitting the ring and spear tackling the American flag. I mean, I was loving it. Well, after he got done, there's a little bit time went by. I had to go to the bathroom. So in order to get to the bathroom, you had to go out this back door and like across this hallway. And I'm standing in the hallway. I look down, and at the far end, here comes Hacksaw Jim Duggan walking down the hallway. I'm like, Dad. And we look, he walks up. I remember shaking his hand. I was little, but I remember he had hands like a gorilla. Like he just had like hot dogs for fingers. And I remember he was dragging a bag for golf clubs behind him, but there were like 8 2x4s inside it. So he didn't have any golf clubs in his bag. He just had a whole bag of 2x4s with him. And I just remember thinking that was the coolest thing. I never forgot it.
Yeah, he was definitely one of those characters that stay with you when you're watching. I remember everything about him growing up, man.
So my question for you, so you work with a gambler. So I'm assuming you're in the gambling world a little bit.
I'm trying to.
Okay.
I'm like a behind the scenes guy.
Okay.
I do a lot of the technical stuff, but I'm trying to get more into the sports gambling.
All right. So you've probably seen a lot of like bets out there and like odds and things. Do you have a favorite? Like you saw some numbers, you saw a bet that's your favorite. Like I definitely got to hit this bet, and your least favorite. Like I'm definitely staying away from this. Do you have any that stand out to you?
I think a couple days ago, I didn't check it since. It was 2 or 3 days ago. The Flyers were plus 1,000 to win the Stanley Cup, and I almost jumped on that. I almost jumped on that because they've been one of the best teams in the league since January, December, or something like that. I just don't know how you bet on hockey or basketball, even
tough,
baseball at this point.
Yep.
It's just you don't know what's going to happen. The Flyers might have completely lost their mojo, and they might not win another game when they come back. But that's one that I think out of the Sixers, the Phillies, and the Flyers, all local teams in Philly, that I would put money on. The Flyers would be the one, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. But that's one that I think they have the best shot out of all 3 of those teams.
All right.
Nice. That's good stuff, man. Thanks for coming on, and we'll definitely have to get you back on if you can carve out a little time for us, maybe on a Tuesday. So
yeah, that was fun.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me on, and I'll share your page when you you can tag me.
Yeah.
And I'll share it and share the page too.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. We'll put your wrestling page on our little Facebook page too.
Yep.
And
Sweet.
I think we have a few wrestling fans we've had on here. I know.
Oh yeah.
Kevin and Tyler. Yeah, we've had the Big Show on. It's a semi-big show.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. All
right, we'll share it, man. Thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks.
Take it easy.
Okay, good stuff from Mr. Nick Piccone, our Eagles insider, and we're going to roll right into it with another Nick, Mr. Nick Carnevale. I can't say I've ever met him before, but it's one of those guys. I feel like I know you because we have a mutual friend, and he talks a lot about you. Like you said earlier, you spend a lot of time with him. So I just feel like I've already met you, but this is kind of the first time I've ever seen you. So
yeah, absolutely.
We're going to bring you on. We're going to have you be our Patriots insider here. Not my favorite team in the NFL, but you can be our Patriots guy. So why don't you tell everybody where you're at and how you became a Patriots fan?
All right. Well, my name is Nick Carnevale. I was born and raised in Rhode Island, so I was about 90 minutes away from Foxborough. So naturally grew up a Patriots fan. Had a very tough offseason this year with Tom leaving. That was tough. That's been my quarterback since I can remember watching football. But I live in Greenville, North Carolina now. Got a wife and a 15-month-old son, so football is my escape from it all.
I hear you. Yeah. I also have Bobby's got a son. I got two, and my two are in T-ball now, so that's where I was at earlier. So it's an interesting time, but yeah, the football is definitely my day. Sundays are my day, so I hear you. All right, man. So you kind of bring me into my first question right there, kind of touching on old Mr. Brady. If we would have did this episode maybe a month ago, I might have had to rag on you a little bit more, but you guys go out and sign Cam, who's probably on the complete opposite spectrum of Tom Brady when you're talking about, I don't know, personality and just the way he carries himself. So just give me your thoughts. I know obviously you don't like Tom leaving, but I don't know. To me, Jared Stidham was never going to be the guy. I knew they were going to do something sneaky, and they brought Cam in on like a $1 million deal, $550,000 guaranteed. So, the first thing that he does that Brett Belichick don't like, I wouldn't be surprised they cut him. But, he's definitely better than Stidham. So give me your thoughts on old Mr. Cam Newton replacing your boy Brady.
I mean, you can't ever replace Tom, but, I did a little looking into him when we signed him, obviously, and living in North Carolina, I got to watch him a little more than I wanted to. But, in 2018, that was like the last time that he actually played. I don't count the 2 games in 2019. And in the first 8 games of that year, he led the Panthers to a 6-2 record, and all they had was McCaffrey. I mean, I can't name a wide receiver on the Carolina Panthers that year other than Greg Olsen at tight end. And he actually had better numbers than Tom Brady through the first 8 games in 2019. So, I mean, if we can get that Cam that is healthy, he doesn't even have to be MVP Cam. I think with the culture and the players that we have on offense, the Patriots could compete at least to win the AFC East again.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I didn't think y'all would sign Cam. Belichick, he really needs accuracy and he needs people to toe the line, and that's not Cam. So I mean, this really surprised me. People ask me a lot if I thought Pats would sign Cam, and no. Sure enough, it happens. But honestly, I mean, he is a huge upgrade, like Brian said, over Jared Stidham. So I think you guys are sitting in a good spot.
And the deal, I mean, like
I
said,
I really.
Yeah, I mean, just the deal that he got. I mean, $1 million. I mean, that's a lot of money to us, but in NFL lingo, you got.
Well, I think it's up to 7 with incentives and everything.
Yeah, and that's still less than Chase Daniel and Case Keenum are going to make just holding the clipboard. So I mean, that's just kind of crazy to me. But hey, that's just Bill Belichick. I mean, I don't know. And like you said, I mean, if Cam goes out there and he can be healthy, I mean, he could get that 3 or 4 year deal and, start making some big bucks again. But I don't know.
And I think
It'll
we'll
be
find
hard
out.
Yeah.
I think we'll find out, too, if Bill Belichick is really the greatest coach of all time, because he's going to definitely have to adapt. Him and Josh McDaniels are going to have to change that offense. It's not a shotgun, drop back, and throw offense anymore. I think you might see a little more of an RPO, especially, like I said, if Cam's healthy, if Sony Michel decides to play at all this year, we could see a little more of that, I think.
And that kind of rolls into my question about Cam. He needs weapons. And this kind of is a reoccurring theme on the show tonight. We had Eagles on, and they don't have great receivers. But why don't the Patriots ever seem to have or want or get a big dominating wide receiver? It seems like they always go after, or they're more than happy to have smaller, quicker possession receivers rather than one that can really open up the offense with their athleticism. And obviously they tried the Antonio Brown and the Josh Gordon experiments, but I think everyone knew how they were going to go. Bill Belichick was basically just trying to steal a few wins before those guys inevitably fell apart. Now you have to turn back the clock to Randy Moss's ridiculous record-breaking 2007 campaign, 2007, to find a wide receiver not named Julian Edelman or Wes Welker who has led the Pats in receiving. Receiver. Now, Gronk led him a couple years, but I'm talking wide receiver. Welker even had more receiving yards than Moss did in 2008 and 2009. Is this by design? Why don't they invest more in a big athletic receiver to help keep defenses honest?
It's a good question, and it seems like over the years, being a Patriots fan, other than that 2007 season, like you mentioned, Tom Brady was never that deep ball passer. We worked well on moving the ball downfield, taking the time off the clock, because the defense was never really that number one defense like we had last year. It was always, okay, we got to keep the opposing quarterback off the field. Let's have a 7-minute, 10-play drive and keep, because at the time it was Peyton Manning. It was quarterbacks like that rolled down the field with their 7 weapons and scored immediately. I think this year, though, I agree. We still don't have that big play number one true guy, but it goes back to that culture and really buying in. Like we said, we've got Edelman. He's not a number one, but he's that number one slot guy. I think N'Keal Harry, if he takes a jump this year, he's got the height, he's got the speed. His hands are terrible, but if he can really take that step and work on catching the ball, he could be a threat downfield. And Mohamed Sanu, we got him for a second rounder. I thought that was high, but he looks amazing so far in the little bit that I've looked at him in the offseason. And he was a great number 2 in Atlanta, a really good number 2 in Cincy. If he could come over and kind of step into that number 1 role and let N'Keal Harry get some easy targets, not being on that number 1 corner, I think that wide receiver core could be good. Not great, but good.
Now, I did a little research, and I did find that for a receiver to be good, he does need to be able to catch the ball. So hopefully N'Keal Harry can figure that out. But seriously, I think what made Tom Brady the best quarterback of all time is all these quarterbacks try to push the ball. Maybe I can fit in this pocket. Maybe this guy's open. Tom Brady throws to the open receiver every time, no matter where he is. He could be 1 inch down the field or 100 yards down the field, and Brady is going to throw to whoever's open regardless of where he is on the field. And I really think that helped make him great. But he showed with Moss, now granted it was a long time ago, but he showed that he can push the ball down the field. And I guess I just never understood why the Patriots didn't try to emphasize that and try to get him more guys like, not like Moss, but, bigger, faster receivers that can go up and get it.
Trust me, as a Patriots fan, there's nothing more aggravating than every single offseason watching Tom Brady take a pay cut so that we would go out and sign a receiver and we spend no money on a defensive lineman. It's something that I can say as a lifetime Patriots fan has infuriated us. Why not take a chance on Des Bryant last year, or just like we do on everybody else, take a chance. I was really excited when we signed Antonio Brown. It's a shame that it didn't work out, but I tell you, any Patriots fan you talk to, that's the lifetime question is why didn't we go get somebody to help him out and make it easier? because I feel he would have stayed this year had we done that.
Yeah, that's tough. Antonio Brown, I think today he just announced his retirement again from the NFL, but he's just waiting for somebody to call his phone, I think. So my next question for you is going to be a big picture question here. I mean, the AFC East seemed to have gotten a little better. I know the Dolphins went out and signed pretty much 20 free agents, I think, this year. The Bills, I think, got a little better, getting Stephon Diggs. The Jets kind of still stink, but we won't really touch on them. So, just like you said earlier, I think this year we're going to find out how good of a coach Belichick is. And, with Cam Newton as the quarterback, I mean, I think the offense is going to change a lot. So just give me your overall, thoughts on the year. You still think the Patriots are the team to beat? And how you guys going to finish off the year?
I'm hoping 10-6. We've got the hardest strength of schedule this year. I got 5 games written down right here that right off the bat, I mean, you're tough saying that the Patriots are going to win even if Cam is 100%. The Seahawks in Seattle, the Chiefs in Kansas City, and then the Rams in Week 14 in LA. People, the Rams took a step back, but I still think they're a good team. And then we've got the 49ers and the Ravens at home. Those are just – and it seems like the NFL spread them out 2 weeks apart. So it seems like we get a break with the AFC East, and then we got to come back and play these powerhouses. I could see 10-6, maybe 11-5, but that's saying that we beat Buffalo twice, and I don't know. I think we'd still win the AFC East. I think the dominoes have to fall in the perfect scenario for us to go much further than the divisional round, though. And it pains me to say that.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to pick you up a little bit, I think, with my next question. Okay. So please, for a few seconds, listen to this list that I have constructed in regards to the Patriots defense. Last year, they were first in points given up, first in total yards, second turnovers, first in first downs given up, first in completions given up, first in passing touchdowns given up, first in missed tackles, first in completions percentage, first in third down conversions, and first in QB rating by a lot. Opposing QBs had a quarterback rating of under 63, and the team that ranked second gave up a rating of 77.5. That defense is unreal. And outside of Stephon Gilmore, there aren't any huge names on the defense. Now, most people have probably heard of maybe Dante Hightower, maybe the McCourty twins, but all of them are over 30 years old. Yet, Belichick finds a way to get it done. You have to go all the way back to 2011 before you find a Pats defense that wasn't ranked in the top 10 in points allowed. How do they keep doing this? Is it the coaching? Is it scouting, defensive scheme? Is it Bill Belichick made a deal with the devil? How do they do this with their defense year in and year out?
The big thing is Bill Belichick brings in players that are good at a specific thing. So they bring in a player, and he may only be good. He may be, a number one cornerback on the Titans, for example, but he's only good at man-to-man. And that player, that cornerback, will stay in on man-to-man. And you'll see that when they run a zone, he's not on the bench. And I think a really good example of that, and I go back to the Super Bowl, is Malcolm Butler. A great corner, one of our best at the time. Belichick sat him the whole Super Bowl, but he was good at a specific thing. He was really good at that zone coverage, and he wasn't in on man coverage. Belichick signs players that are good at that one thing, gets them to buy in that you may not be on the field for every defensive snap, but you're going to be on the field every single time we run zone. And your one thing you need to do is run that zone perfectly. And he gets players that buy into that, are willing to win, and take a step back from all about being about themselves.
Solid. All right. Smart man.
Yeah. I guess we're going to find out this year, because I think, the defense, even if they take a little step back, like Bobby rattled off all those number one rankings. So
it's crazy.
Even if you can stay within like the top 10, you're still going to be a stud defense. And
yep.
we'll find out how good the offense is with McDaniels and Belichick with Cam, because I mean he's a complete opposite spectrum from Brady. So, he's never really had a quarterback that can actually run the ball, and we'll see how he does with them. But all right, man, I think that wraps up our Patriots questions here. So at the end of our little interviews here, we like to kind of just do a random type question. But before that, I know John, my buddy John, he told me you're a police officer, obviously, as your day job, but you also do a little real estate on the side. So we have a lot of listeners from the Eastern North Carolina area. So why don't you kind of plug your real estate type stuff? And I know you touched on this a little bit, but me and Bobby are both Eagles fans. So I know Super Bowl 52 was probably one of the best days of my life, barring my kid.
2 weeks before my son was born too.
Yeah. So, so barring my marriage and my 2 kids being born, that was probably the best day of my life. So give me plug your real estate business, and just give me a little breakdown on Super Bowl 52 from a Patriots fan angle.
I'll say Super Bowl 52, I mean, we lost, but was that not one of the greatest Super Bowls that you've ever watched? I mean, the offensive explosion.
The best one I've ever seen, for sure.
It was a really great game to watch. And how many times have we seen the Patriots win on, like a fumble or something like that? And then to have us drop back and driving down the field, and now it's happening to us. And the fumble happened. It was just so deflating. But thankfully, we were able to come back in 2018 against the Rams and get it.
That's true. Yeah. You didn't have to wait long to get another one, so.
No.
I'm still waiting for Gronk to come down with that Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Yes. But like you said, I'm a police officer by day. I do real estate on the side, try to get a little extra money in for the family, little side hustle. I work with Berkshire Hathaway here in Greenville, North Carolina. We service just about everybody. I can do real estate all the way out to the beaches, and just about as far as Greene County. So anything that anybody needs, you can find me. I have a real estate Instagram page that's got contact information for me. That's at Nick Carnevale Real Estate. And I'll make sure to get these guys a copy of it so they can put it up somewhere. But it's got all my contact information. Any questions, anything like that, I'd be happy to help out.
We'll definitely post that to the page for you.
Thank you, guys.
So last one for me. I've visited New England, Vermont, and Boston a few times, a couple places up there. And when I was up there, the first time I ever went to Boston, I had a bowl of New England clam chowder, and my life was changed after having that bowl of soup. And I knew I could never eat another bowl of that anywhere else in the world. So you're from there, Rhode Island. If someone comes to visit, the New England area, what is it that you recommend? Like, is it lobster roll? Is it poutine? Is it the New England clam chowder like I had? What is one thing you think represents New England as far as food is concerned that if you go up here, you have to have?
You got to have the lobster. You're 100% right. The fresh lobster caught right off the water in Newport, and you get to eat it in downtown Newport with those views, the sunset, the water. You can tell, I mean, the cobblestone roads, it's just something about being in that old time little town, and the food, it's just, there's nothing better.
All right. Gosh, I feel like you just wrote a love story.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place. It really is.
All right, man. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. Well, I know before you came on here, I know you said you were a big fantasy guy. Me and Bobby kind of touched on some fantasy stuff before we had our guest on today. So maybe we'll have you back on, do a little fantasy preview, and thanks for coming on and covering the old New England Patriots.
Absolutely. Have a good one, guys.
All right, man.
Awesome.
Take it easy.
Thanks. See you.
See ya.
Good stuff from our Patriots guy, Nick Carnevale, right there. So, yeah, we'll have to plug his real estate and Nick's wrestling podcast on our page this week, so everybody can go and follow that.
And music by Dunson, as always, our intro.
music by Dunstan. Like Bobby posted today, if you guys have any, we're kind of maybe going to start gearing a little bit more towards fantasy here since we're getting towards that time of year. So
Yes.
I have one. I had one good question come in, but I think we're going to save it till next week. Maybe we'll, if we can get maybe 3 or 4 questions, maybe we'll talk about that during our first segment next week. Answer some of those questions. At least have, 2 or 3 good ones. We'll go over them, and then we'll be back with you guys next Tuesday or Wednesday here. So check it out on Facebook, Apple Podcast, Podbean. And then I know Bobby said we have a couple shirts left. So if anybody wants one, I know we've sold.
Not many.
We've sold a lot in the last week or so since we've had that post. So I guess we'll do an inventory and let you know what sizes we have left. And if anybody wants one, we'll ship them out. I know I shipped a couple on Monday to some of my buddies back up north. So, we'll see how many we have left. And
y'all are great. Thanks so much for all the support.
All right. Be back with you next week.
See ya.
See ya.